So last night I did a warning stream talking about Palworld, the game that the indie YouTube scene is pretending is like gonna be the Pokemon killer, is gonna be some big thing.
Bro, if you're doing a warning stream for literally anything, like, you've lost the plot. It's just not that serious. But yes, Palworld was the next big thing. It's overtaking Counter-Strike on Steam, it's rapidly breaking player count records and sales records, it sold 7 million copies on Steam alone in 5 days. Like, is it a Pokemon killer? No, of course not. One indie game can't completely kill a brand like Pokemon. But is it a sign that Pokemon needs to step up its game? Is it a sign that Pokemon is vulnerable, especially outside of Nintendo's direct ecosystem? Absolutely.
It has 500,000 concurrent players on Steam.
Lol?
It's sold over 1 million copies. It's over for the Pokemon Company.
Well, it did way better than 1 million copies. Like, stupid better than 1 million.
It's over for Nintendo, right? I talked about what people were gonna do.
This is off topic, but I would love it if you centered your camera. Like, you're the focus of the video, and you're only taking up, like, the bottom third of the screen. Why?
And, yeah, I was right. Like, all day long, we were bombarded with ridiculous notions that, like, oh, this game is a masterpiece. Oh, look at me play this game. Oh, look at how great it is.
Well, it sure is getting lots of people hooked on it. Masterpiece? I don't know, maybe to some people. I think it's a hard game to call objectively a masterpiece, I'll give you that. But it's just a fun game, you know? It takes the ideas set forth by the Pokemon series and expands upon them, where Nintendo and their developers have refused to expand. If they're not going to do it, why not let someone else do it? And they've proven that the Pokemon concept, done well, can sell gangbusters on PC too. So hey, Nintendo, how about dropping your stupid obsession with exclusivity? Or are you still scared that the big spooky modders are making your games better than you ever could? Sincerely, a competitive Melee player.
And now that the hype session is over, much like Temtem before it, the game is completely forgotten.
This video of his is a few days old, by the way. Like, he thought this game was completely forgotten about at the time that it had only sold 1 million copies. So say it with me, kids. LOL.
It is dwindling in popularity. More and more people are starting to notice, like, what's going on. The game is being shilled. You know, YouTubers aren't exactly the biggest advocates for game quality anyway, right?
Well, this is all coming from the guy who shills for every new Pokemon game, so I guess you're correct about that.
They just jump onto trends, right? So with that in mind, with what's been going on, like, what can we learn from this?
Now that I think about it, I didn't see a single YouTube video about Palworld before it blew up. And like, I make a lot of YouTube content. I work from home most of the time, so I basically always have YouTube open in the background with something playing while I'm working. I literally didn't see a single Palworld video until after the game blew up. The idea that YouTubers are the reason this game exploded is just stupid. Like, maybe it was just a good fucking game. Maybe it's just a good quality fucking product. Maybe it's just something that people had been asking for, so naturally they're willing to give it money. Crazy how that works, right? Nintendo has done amazing work making everyone completely stop respecting the Pokemon franchise over the last 5 to 10 years, so you can't be surprised when someone else comes along and fills that void. Also, I'm not sure if it was audible, but if you heard like a weird like whirring in the background, like a weird like in the background of the video up to this point, it's because I have that fucking the litter robot. My wife and I have the litter robot. It's absolutely amazing. 100% recommend the litter robot. But it's on the other side of my house. That shit's fucking loud. We have one of the older models. I don't know if the newer ones are that loud, but goddamn. Consider this an endorsement of the litter robot. Hashtag not sponsored, but I should be. Have you heard of Raid Shadow?
Right, what can we learn from this experience? Well, first of all, it doesn't seem to be possible to use the same kind of techniques to prop up a game like this that the industry uses for Baldur's Gate 3 or whatever.
Yeah, the industry didn't do shit to prop up Baldur's Gate 3. Like, not until after the gaming community had bought it a bunch of times. Like, that's it. You seem to think there's no way a game can succeed in the modern age without a bunch of journalists and publishers telling you that you should like it. Like, you seem to think it's impossible for a game to just be a product well made, and one that people want to buy and spread the word about. Baldur's Gate 3 and Palworld are two success stories for pretty similar reasons. Baldur's Gate 3 was a fantastically designed, content-rich experience released at a time when most AAA RPGs were getting simpler and more streamlined and less polished. And on the other hand, Palworld is a monster collecting game with a rich open world released at a time when the main franchise in the monster collecting genre has been getting worse and worse in terms of content and technical stability and innovation. These are two games that filled a void that major publishers left open. It's not gamers' fault for latching onto them.
Right? Because Overwatch had like a similar kind of like thing where people came out and they tried screaming about, oh man, there are no colorful online shooters in this market.
Overwatch was not a good comparison here. Like, Overwatch actually was an example of the industry declaring something to be popular and good before it was released. If you were in the gaming world back in 2015, 2016, you probably remember this. Like, you weren't allowed to say anything negative about Overwatch before release. And during the first few months of Overwatch, you were just like super not allowed to say anything negative about it. And I guess to some extent that was justified because vanilla Overwatch was genuinely a fantastic game, and it wouldn't have maintained its popularity for as long as it did if that weren't the case. It wasn't like Evolve, where all the big journalists and outlets were like, hey, look at this awesome game, you better be playing this awesome game or you're stupid. And then the game comes out and it immediately disappears. Like, what I'm getting at here is that this comparison sucks. You're trying to take an indie success with organic growth, Palworld, and you're comparing it to a major AAA game that the entire industry was rallying behind, Overwatch. Regardless of how you feel about Overwatch, its success isn't really impressive because it had the entire industry ensuring that it would succeed. Palworld's success is insanely impressive because not only was the industry radio silent about it until like 5 minutes before launch, but its sales are also ridiculous even compared to most AAA games. 7 million copies in 5 days on one platform. And on top of that, a lot of the gaming industry has actually been rallying against this game. I'm sure you've all seen the accusations of plagiarism, of AI-generated content. I've even seen a decent number of AAA devs just openly talking on Twitter about how they think this game was made with malicious intent. And yet, Palworld persists. Maybe the industry should be taking notes. Maybe it's a good thing that gamers still have this much say in what gets popular, despite how corporate this industry has become. Just a thought. Continue.
Overwatch is completely unique in this regard. And then meanwhile, like Splatoon came out last year, was better put together.
I thought you were going to go with TF2 or Paladins for a comparison, but you went with Splatoon, a game that is absolutely nothing like Overwatch. Wasn't expecting that, but okay.
Remained relevant longer, right? Was more unique and creative and had more interesting characters, right? Splatoon stomped Overwatch.
Splatoon had more interesting characters than Overwatch? Bro, I don't know a single character from Splatoon other than Inkling, and I'm not even positive that's what they're called. God, like every time I think you're about to make an actual argument, you just go completely off the rails and start talking about Nintendo stuff, even when it's completely not applicable. Like if you wanted to make the Overwatch wasn't unique argument, TF2 was right there. Paladins was right there.
In every single way, shape, and form. But for the first 10 years, almost, about half that long, about 5 years. For the first several years, people were saying the exact opposite. Until Overwatch completely fell off a cliff, people were saying Overwatch was this big phenomenon.
Because it was? Again, the industry rallying around a game doesn't actually matter if gamers don't play it, and regardless of how you feel about Overwatch, it remained extremely popular for a long time because it was a well-made game. It was a well-made game. It's getting better, I'll admit. The Microsoft acquisition has actually done some pretty good things for Overwatch already. The Overwatch comeback tour has begun, but I think you get my point. The industry can yell and shout about how awesome something is for as long as they want, but if gamers aren't playing it, what the industry says is irrelevant. Just like this argument you're trying to make.
40 million players online at once or something like that. It's one of the most popular things ever. Well, if it was so popular, it wouldn't have fallen off the way it did.
That's not really an argument. Oh, if it were so popular, it wouldn't have stopped being popular. Like, bro, just because something stops being popular doesn't mean it was never popular. Look at the MCU. Look at Star Wars. Look at Call of Duty. Look at Halo. Look at Pokemon. Just because something was popular doesn't mean it's invincible. That's completely irrelevant to the argument you're trying to make.
Okay, like, I don't understand what's so hard to understand about this. And meanwhile, like, Splatoon is still going.
Is it? Like, that's a genuine question, is it? Someone tell me if Splatoon is still relevant, because until I watched this video, I forgot it existed.
And to this day, people will try to do this thing that, like, Blizzard made all these mistakes, like, Overwatch was popular at one point, blah, 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 blah. But no. What actually happened is that you latched onto a trend and began supporting that trend. You began feeding into the beast. You were part of the process of pretending this game was some Game of the Year contender.
That's really stupid. Like, I feel like I already dismantled this point a couple minutes ago, so let's just TLDR this shit. Games can become trendy because the industry tries to make them trendy, or they can become trendy because they're a product well made that gamers latch onto. And sometimes games will be trendy because of both of those reasons, like Overwatch did for a while. But other times, like Palworld, like Baldur's Gate, the gamers dictate to the industry what should be popular. And that's how this should work. That's a healthy industry. It's not healthy when the industry dictates what should be popular. It is healthy when the consumer dictates that, because they're ultimately the ones spending the money and keeping the industry afloat. You're trying really hard to use Overwatch as a dunking point, but it's just not relevant to the point you're trying to make. Overwatch was absolutely a trend for its first few years, but it was also undeniably a well-made game for its first few years. That's why it stayed a trend, and that's also why it stopped being a trend when Blizzard and Activision shit the bed. Because at the end of the day, gamers have the ultimate say over what in this industry remains successful, and I think deep down you know that, which is why games like Palworld and Baldur's Gate 3 upset you so much, because they're the complete antithesis of what Nintendo has been doing for the last, decade.
Right? When in reality, it wasn't really relevant in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, guys, millions of people were playing this game for years on end, but it wasn't relevant. Because I said so. God, Palworld has absolutely broken this kid when he's been rambling about fucking Overwatch for literally no reason.
Overwatch is a really interesting example because right now you can't even go back and play the Overwatch that people supposedly liked.
Yeah, guys, people were playing Overwatch, but then they stopped playing Overwatch because Blizzard shit the bed, but also no one ever liked Overwatch to begin with, even though I've admitted several times in the last minute that there was a change in Overwatch that impacted people's opinions on it and led to them not playing it, but also no one ever liked it to begin with, in a video about Palworld, by the way.
That was the thing with World of Warcraft, was that, people thought that, if we just go back to WoW Classic, it'll be good again, but that didn't happen, right? Because the game was never good to begin with.
I make notes for myself when I do these video responses. I'll watch the video through and write out some notes for certain parts of the video for when I want to record the commentary. And when I got to this part in the video, I literally just wrote, "I'm begging you to get to the point." So, yeah.
It was just a new, novel thing to you at the time, and you got tired of it. And you don't want to admit it, right? You don't want to admit that the game wasn't that good to begin with. So you kind of jump through hoops and make excuses and kind of justify your attitude. You kind of justify why you act this way about these products.
Bro, open your eyes. You've gotten progressively squintier throughout the years, and I don't know why. I guess when you don't put any effort into your content, why would you put effort into opening your fucking eyeballs?
Kind of justify why things are becoming so... why these games are forgotten so quickly, right? Like Elden Ring, Baldur's Gate 3. Long term, these games are not going to be relevant.
Just keep telling yourself that, bud. Just keep telling yourself that Baldur's Gate and Elden Ring won't remain relevant or won't have a continued impact on the industry. I'm sure that's how reality is going to play out.
Elden Ring is already trailing behind Dark Souls in best games ever made polls.
Dude, people are shitting their pants for literally any piece of Elden Ring DLC news. I don't think FromSoft is losing sleep.
Right? Elden Ring is never going to be more popular than Dark Souls. Just like Dark Souls is never going to be more popular than Skyrim.
Again, you know a game has completely broken somebody when they've been rambling about literally anything but the thing they started the video talking about. He started this video talking about Palworld, and since then he's talked about Overwatch and Splatoon and Baldur's Gate and now Elden Ring and Dark Souls and Skyrim. Like, bro, I promise it's not that serious.
And just like how Skyrim is never going to be more popular than Zelda.
Oop, Harmon Smith compares a completely unrelated game to a Nintendo product. Cross that one off your bingo card.
Right? Like, there is really nothing you can do, right, about to establish, to demolish these established Nintendo properties.
Yeah, I hate to break it to you, but the goal isn't to demolish Nintendo properties. Nobody sets out with the intention of doing that. I like to think that game developers set out with the intention of just making a good game, or making a product that people enjoy, and if they pull influence from Nintendo properties, then so be it, you know? I don't see the issue here. If a Nintendo property were to be demolished by a completely unrelated game, isn't that Nintendo's fault for not making a better product?
Right? By saying that, like, Palworld is going to, like, beat Pokemon.
Oh, good. You remember the point of the video.
You would have to have, like, a TCG, you would have to have a merchandise line, you would have to have, you know, an anime adaptation, you would have to have, like, all of this stuff, right?
Yeah, that's what Palworld would need to completely demolish the Pokemon brand. It's almost like that's not the point of the game. It's almost like this is just a fucking indie dev trying to make a good game, and it's nothing deeper than that. You fucking goose. Like, what is this?
All of these highly successful, lucrative products on top of the video game franchise, right? And whatever you think about the video game franchise right now, like, there's no denying that Pokemon is actually doing quite a bit better in those other avenues, right?
Holy shit, did Harmon Smith just indirectly criticize a Nintendo property? Fucking pack the mules with drinking water and beef jerky because the asteroid is a-comin'.
Because I would have said before Gen 8, like before Dexit, like the big controversial thing people had about the brand was how the anime was being treated. How they didn't retire Ash and how they weren't like really evolving the formula and how like it was in this weird spot. Like, old fans didn't want to keep watching it, but new ones weren't really coming in, so they decided to finally retire Ash as a character and bring in some new people and, like, finally get some fresh blood in there and finally get some more creative storytelling and finally do some more things. Like,
it's actually bizarre hearing Harmon Smith indirectly, but still there. It's so weird to hear him criticize Nintendo things. Like, I'm just gonna come out and say it. If someone as rabidly obsessed with Nintendo as Harmon Smith, if he was more critical of Nintendo, this dude is actually very capable of making very intelligent and very specific criticisms of this company. But he just doesn't. And that's why it's so annoying. Like,
years ago, the anime was in trouble. But then, like, the games picked up the slack now, and now with, like, the games kind of being attacked by these pretendos, like the anime.
See, nope, there he goes. There he goes again. He was like starting to actually grow into a more honest, critical version of himself, and now we're right back to calling anyone who criticizes the thing pretendos, which by your own logic, wouldn't you be a pretendo because you were literally criticizing the thing 5 seconds ago? Oh my god. It's exhausting. But people keep telling me to respond to your videos, and no matter how many times I say I'm going to stop, and it's like cocaine.
Kind of stepping up. You know, the TCG is stepping up. You know, like the mobile apps are stepping up. Like, there is no way in the world that Palworld, like a glitchy, uninspired, you know, straight up plagiarized mess is ever going to topple Pokemon.
It already has. Like, it already has. Palworld has absolutely beaten the most recent Pokemon games in terms of public opinion, in terms of innovation, in terms of new ideas in the monster hunting, monster collecting genre. I don't know what to tell you. It's a brand new IP that sold 7 million copies on one platform in 5 days, and it's basically because it's deliberately doing the things that Pokemon has been refusing to do because sheep like you eat up every single new entry. This isn't hard to understand. Also, it has guns. Pokemon with guns is just an awesome idea.
And that was obvious to me from the beginning, before I even looked at what the game was and what it was like. And before I started realizing that, like, wow, these are just Pokemon designs with like different typings and different colors, right?
Also, I love the people who were like, Palworld monsters are just Pokemon monsters. But they don't want to talk about how many Pokemon monster designs are eerily similar to Digimon monster designs, to Yu-Gi-Oh monster designs, to many other anime monster designs. Like, it's just let it go. No one's complaining about this shit when Pokemon does it. I'm not even complaining about it now. I don't care who had the idea first. I care about who did the idea better. And like, obviously don't just copy paste other people's shit. Plagiarism is an actual thing. But what you're describing is not plagiarism. It is someone doing the idea better. And it upsets you because you're a fucking goofball.
like before I realized how like blatant it was, right? Like I was saying that like this is another Temtem. This is another Yokai Watch. This is another Digimon. You know, a flash in the pan thing that's relevant because like people desperately need Pokemon to go away so they can start claiming that Nintendo is doomed, but like it just isn't happening.
But why do people keep insisting that Nintendo suffer? Why do people keep insisting that Nintendo's Pokemon games need to suffer? Why are they doing that? Why is that mindset so widespread? It wasn't always there. That wasn't always a mindset. Why is that a thing now? Do you know? No, you don't know. Everyone watching the video still knows. I'm like 5 inches away from tapping out of this one because I'm starting to die.
Like Pokemon, it's interesting because it's not just the fact that it's so entrenched and so popular. Like, Pokemon is completely dominant in its niche, right?
The phrase dominant in its niche is an interesting way to put it because it's kind of an oxymoron when you think about it. If it's a niche, then just inherently there's not a lot of competition. So, of course, something is going to be dominant. Like, saying something is dominant in a genre is way more impressive than dominant in a niche. You know what I'm saying? I'm fading so fast. Fuck. I have to go to a dinner party after this, too. God, I'm recording this at 4 p.m. and I gotta go to a dinner party in like 2 hours. I gotta make coffee. I'm not gonna make it.
In a lot of ways, like I said this on my stream, like I don't think you're ever going to topple Pokemon by doing the same thing as it is, right?
Palworld is not the same thing as Pokemon is. There's a lot of things different about it, and the people saying that Palworld is literally just Pokemon are people who don't actually want to think about the things that are different about it. It's the Pokemon formula, sure. But there's a lot of changes. There's a lot of improvements. There's a lot of things implemented that people want to be implemented in Pokemon and have been asking to be implemented in Pokemon for a long fucking time, and they just haven't been. Yeah, you know what? I'm done. I can't do this anymore. There's another 3 minutes of this video. No, there's not. I'm done with it. Harmon Smith isn't real. Harmon Smith can't hurt you. Toodles.